Welcome back. Still with me here on Luck on Sunday. Steed on Sunday, really. Wayne Hutchison, John Neil Donagh and Dave Yates as well. Coming up next, it's this week's Talking Points. Straight off the bat, we have to go to Ascot. Diego de Charmel taking out stablemate Cape Land, holding on to the race yesterday afternoon. Should he, shouldn't he? Did he jump enough of the fence? Dave, what did you make of it?
I thought at the time that he had jumped enough of the fence because he jumped the highest bit. Now, obviously, there was a fair amount of hilarity in the press room about this, that it was the stewards would file it in the too difficult category, and I have a lot of sympathy with the officials because I think there are two things to consider. Did the horses jump enough of the final fence, and also the interference caused by Diego de Charmel to Cape Land? Of course, those two horses are both trained by Paul Nicholls, so you didn't have the connections of Cape Land being trained by Martin Pipe or someone going up to the steward's box and threatening legal action. So it was a very, very difficult one. I think that the way to deal with this in the future, as they do in Ireland, is to put, certainly with regards to the jumping offence, is just to put flags at the extreme of each obstacle, and if you're inside that flag, like in Ireland, and like skiers, if you're inside it with both feet, then you're fine, and if you're not,
it's the same with cross country, isn't it?
Yeah, good point, John. As an owner, if you'd have lost that race, would you have been fuming?
I'd be fuming, yeah. But the one good thing about being an owner with Nige is he will have been up there screaming at that, waving his fist at the face.
And Hutch, as a jockey, you'd have been pleading that you'd done enough within the rules?
What, on the winner?
Yeah.
I think he's come over the fence, so albeit not the right part, but he's come over part of the fence. So.
And I actually thought he would have won the race anyway, personally. I just think he found enough, he idled enough. I think he would have won. Did you take that view?
I agree with you there, yeah. My opinion would be the same.
Well, he kept it, set a precedence, and I saw Lucky tweeted actually the fact that talking about our interference rules, etc., etc. If you're ever wondering if they're the best in the world, then just watch that replay. So that's food for thought. Next up, low sun. Well, 20, 30 years ago, I'm sure they had low sun, but I suppose with safety and all of that in mind, it's a different ball game these days, is it, Wayne?
Yeah, those two men, isn't it? Health and safety. That's the way the world's gone now. But no, look, low sun, it is what it is, and obviously, the easiest way to explain it is you're sort of driving down the road with the sun glaring in your eyes, and you're needing the sun visor down. But the other element of that as well is it can create a false ground line with a shadow in front of a hurdle or a fence. The year Annie Power fell at the last at Cheltenham, I actually fell at the same hurdle. I was in fifth on Lunique, and that was because of a false ground line. The sun wasn't actually in your eyes going to the hurdle, but it created a false ground line where both horses took off early and clipped the top of the hurdle.
So almost a shadow.
Yeah.
Interesting. John, is the timing of it? Should we have a bit more ability to ad lib and jostle with the card?
It's not a low sun issue; it's a scheduling issue. On foot, the sun was here before we came along with racing. It's not going to change now, We know the time of year. It's a long street. I was there at Aintree. I think that's what we're talking about, the old road. It's a scheduling issue.
So you think chases early on the card?
Because look at the weather. Look what it's going to do. I know there's an obsession with the betting and whatever, but we can move things. We can actually look on the day and go, we're going to move the old road to an hour before or an hour, half an hour later. I know it's difficult, and I know we've got obviously these things to take into account, but I think it is a scheduling issue and not a low sun issue.
Well, the race after the old run, they were able to jump the obstacles again, weren't they?
Because we were, innit?
Yeah. So movable feast, Dave. Think on our feet. How do you feel?
When we can now look at weather forecasts, they might not be totally accurate, but we can look at them for the next day. If we go on holiday, or the next day if you think of going out on the bike, a computer forecast will tell you what is going to happen and when. And so I think that John's right, that there is scope to look at that in detail. We're only just getting around to dovetailing races between Britain and Ireland, for goodness sake. So there's plenty of room for improvement. I do think, and I know we've run over time, I do think there is a little bit of a tendency to look at this a bit flippantly, because were I a jockey on a horse, Wayne said, you drive along the motorway at 90 mile an hour, 70 miles an hour in a car with the sun in your eyes. It's a frightening experience. Goodness knows what it's like to sit on a thoroughbred that you can't see, they can't see. Not for me, thank you.
Okay, overtime, £10 in the swear box, a yellow card for Yates. Syndicate's up next, of course, Ken Boy. That's the reason we're talking about this, the running and the monitoring, perhaps, of those, Dave. Work to be done?
Yes, almost certainly. It's a very difficult one. This, obviously, Supreme Racing, who own Ken Boy, that horse wasn't able to run at Down Royal because of irregularities. I think Willie Mullins said this week that syndicate is largely run by one person. It's probably too big a job for one person. It's very difficult because watching the Breeders' Cup last night, I'm always extremely envious of journalists in America. Go and live there then, comes the call from the cheap seats. But the fact that they're interviewing owners, so a lot of whom are sort of good old boys, Americans made good, they're not oil sheikhs or members of Coolmore who are inaccessible to us. And syndicates are one way in this country whereby, quote unquote, ordinary people can hit the big time. So they're a brilliant thing. Obviously, that they do tend to hit the headlines in a negative way because that's just how news works. But yes, it's probably right that well, it's certainly right. They should be looked at.
John, I'd really like to see syndicates over on this side of the IOC flourish, and I think, you know, all the, whether it's the elite racing, onto winner owners group, there's so many, and I'm sure they cater for all levels, whether it's a group of 10 to 20 to 10,000 or whatever. There is something for everyone's pocket. But I would like to see more syndicates with just 10, 20, 30 pals getting together, or people from a village getting together.
I think it's vital, because if you look, I'm not having a go at these people who've been around for a long time, but if we're going to rely on Gigginstown, they're going.
Yeah.
If we're going to rely on all these owners who've been around, if you want to call them the establishments, who don't necessarily like syndicates, well, I'm afraid racing won't survive. It's going to need to move on, and it needs syndicates, because if the average person, okay, I know if it's 200 quid a month, whatever it is to have a share in a horse, if they don't have access to national hunt racing, then I think it's in trouble.
Let's move on to Marmello, who's not going to be allowed to run in the Melbourne Cup, of course. A bit like Fleeting stateside in the Breeders' Cup, the decision taken, Dave, out of the owners and the trainers' hands. Should that be left to those jurisdictions, as Aidan O'Brien, I think, has said, we have to abide by their rules, quote unquote, or do the people who know the horse best be allowed to have the casting vote?
I think there's an argument both ways, because obviously, you know, it's right that welfare of horse and jockey is absolutely paramount, and that's never been more than it is today. However, I do think that there is definitely a valid argument for connections of horses to say, well, look, mate, this horse's welfare and the welfare of the person on top is absolutely paramount to us. We're not taking any risks. We're not going to fly a horse around the world to take risks. But I know this horse very well, and he's had that issue that you've highlighted for a long time. He's run to his optimum with it, and it doesn't worry us. I do think there's scope for that. How many sportsmen, footballers, horses, sportswomen, tennis players, etc., athletes, how many of them go out to compete and say, well, I've got something down here, but I'm going to have a park.
John, if you'd gone, you'd quarantined that horse, you've paid for the travel expenses, you've gone down under, you'd be absolutely livid.
Oh, you'd be, I mean, you would. And apart from, not just the money though, is it? It's the expectation you've gone there with, the dream. These people have probably been planning it for a year or whatever they've been doing, and then to go there, and I say, the trainer has sent the horse there for a race like that. He hasn't sent it because it's not ready. And
do you think, is it fear of what could go wrong? Is it the kind of the media backlash, if you
it's
like?
The blame culture, isn't it?
Yeah. Is that the problem?
Well, that's partly the reason, and also the fact that they want to set higher welfare standards than ever before. We completely understand that, but as I say, in all instances, there must be scope for input, whether it's decisive or not, for people who know, in this case, the horse, and say, right, let's talk about this, because I promise you, this is not a serious issue.
Friday night, the Vertum Futurity was run under the lights at Newcastle. 3 decades on from its inception, the all-weather with a Group 1 race and a classic trial as well. How far the all-weather has come in those 3 decades. Dave, a good thing, a sign of the times, or just a kind of needs must in the circumstances?
What a fantastic way of celebrating the 30th anniversary of all-weather racing, to have a Group 1 race, the first Group 1 race staged on an artificial surface. It started as a dirty word that attracted poor horses. Obviously there was the ill-starred all-weather hurdling as well, but it has developed into a fantastic part of British racing where the surface is consistent, there's no overwatering, you can rely on the surface, it's a safe surface, it's attracted horses like Gennati, like Enable. It's an absolute triumph, and I'm delighted that it was restaged, and I thought it was a great result. I'm sorry, but I've got only positive things to say.
It took me a few years to get my head around the Northumberland Play not being run on turf. So there is an element of resistance to change, or just what you're used to perhaps born into my reaction. I did find it odd seeing people who've probably gone to see the fireworks on a Friday night at a racetrack, and a few hundred of them watching a Group 1 with potential classic contenders. I did find it a bit odd.
Yeah, but I think what would have been worse if they'd have lost the race, you know. I mean,
Sure,
I think it was a victim of circumstance again, but if you lose the race, then that's a travesty, isn't it? Again, these people like Wayne will know, what had the horse laid out for it, the trainer's been getting it ready for 4 or 5 months now, aimed at that race. Yeah. To actually not have the race would have been a far bigger crime than a few fireworks.
Absolutely needs must. I agree, that probably says more about me having to
get
used to it than anything else. So, you know, a pantheon of Group 3s on the all-weather at Kempton as well. Perhaps it is a sign of the times. We had Richard Phillips with a guest column in the Racing Post last week, and he was highlighting and putting forward the notion of a national racehorse day, being supported by many, including Oliver Sherwood, since Wayne, to kind of, you know, get on the front foot for horse racing, shine a light on all the good stuff. You know, you're in a yard every other day. You love and have worked with horses since you were a kid. Let's get that message out.
Exactly, and sort of show what the industry does and what we do to care, you know, for the horses, and how well they're looked after, and you know, how everybody, you know, is in the sport because they love horses.
Yeah, first and foremost, how do we go about this then, Dave?
Well, we start with a blank canvas. It's certainly something that the whole industry, and this is one thing, how often do we say this? It's something that every constituent part of the industry can work together with. Well, that's never happened before. No. Owners, trainers, jockeys, media. We can all push in the same direction with this. There are national days for absolutely everything, every form of human activity you can imagine, and some that you hadn't imagined.
Silver hair day. Yeah.
Silver hair day. Thank you very much.
No hair.
And so why not? Why not celebrate? They say that it's too often the case these days, and I've said this a million times on Racing TV, and I'm sorry to say so again, that we as a community are on the back foot defending ourselves. We should be on the front foot celebrating what we do. There's not one person of the 4 of us who thinks that we're working in industry of which we have any doubts.
And it could work in various ways. One would be, you know, like at Lambourne Newmarket Open Day, perhaps on that day. The other thing is, it's an and finally on the news at 10, isn't it? And suddenly it's National Racehorse Day, and you get a clip on the news at 10 with someone going to a yard saying, look at this.
I think we're incredibly good at getting press releases for negative stuff, and it goes out there straight away. The BHA is guilty of it, you know. We need to be positive when there's something good out there. Let's get it out there.
When they had the national weights at the V&A, and obviously the sound thing didn't work. We'll park that for one moment. But Rule the World, not ruler of, Rule the World, the national winner, was standing on the steps of the V&A in Kensington in a blaze of flash guns, wasn't he? And that was a brilliant media thing. This grand national winner standing on the steps of an iconic venue in London. There must be scope to develop that.
Yeah, and the BHA and Great British Racing are pushing those ideas forward, as they have done with Riding the Dream, the film we're going to talk about later in the show. Finally, Jeremy Irons. Yes, he's going to play Cecil, Sir Henry Cecil, in a film about Frankel and the late great trainer as well. I tell you what, you could have There could have been an intriguing list of possibilities for that, Dave.
Very interesting this, because again this follows on very nicely from the National Racehorse Day. Again, there is going to be a film about one of our most celebrated and loved personalities within racing, and the person who's playing him is Jeremy Irons, an Oscar winner, and Jeremy Irons is actually involved in the production of the film as well. This isn't a sport where we need to think, oh, well, you know, let's not talk about horse racing. It's a sport that we should celebrate. It's a sport that lots of people are indifferent to. There is a relatively small but extremely vocal minority, largely on social media, who oppose it, but it's a sport that is cherished and loved by an awful lot of people. That is reflected in that. I know one of the interviews you did with Sir Henry, and I believe that Ewan McGregor has been lined up for your role, Alex. So
and who's going to play Tom Queally? I want to know who's going to play Tom Queally.
They tell me when I had hair it might have been David Tennant, but that was long, long ago. Who would play you in Wayne Hutch the film?
God knows.
Who could it be?
No,
Jason Statham.
Jason Statham, yes. Beautiful. John, who's the silver fox for you?
Martin Freeman would play me, wouldn't he? Because he's funny, interesting and all that. But interestingly about this, we've been working on a movie for a few years based around the National, and hopefully we'll get that off that ground in the next 18 months or so. But anything that's in the general public about racing like that and a story like that is fantastic for us, because we've got to cross those boundaries and get it out there.
Excellent stuff. That's this week's Talking Points. I can't let John go without you telling me one or two. How many times have you left your home in Spain with Doreen not knowing and having any idea where you were going?
I think these things get exaggerated. I went out for a pint of milk once and people don't seem to want to forget it. Yeah, I went missing once. It was me in-law's 50th wedding anniversary, whatever it was, and I sort of left the party and flew to Sandown, and I told I'd just nipped the shops. But, you know, as you do. It's all been forgotten about, Al. It was all forgotten about. It was all forgotten about till you just brought it up again.
Sorry, Doreen. That's this week's Talking Point.
Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.